Our next contest for the Better Photography Weekly Challenge is Neighbourhoods. Our judge and mentor is Mr. Dinesh Khanna. His career path veered from being a calculator salesman, a garment quality checker, a busboy in New York bar, and a client servicing executive, after which he finally gave in to his desire to make images. A managing trustee of Nazar Foundation, he's one of the co-founders of Delhi Photo Festival and director of Zirish Academy at Museo Camera, where he conducts photography courses. Currently, he is working on various commercial assignments as well as two of his new photo books. Hello and welcome, sir.
Hi, thank you for having me for this. It's a very interesting contest. It's a wonderful magazine, and it's a very interesting subject which you've chosen for me, mentor or look at. So what I wanted to do was to share just a few of my own photographs from around the country where I, travel and have been traveling for the last more than 3 decades. And one of my most abiding personal interest in photography has been to use photography as my way of, exploring India, exploring my country, exploring my people, exploring the cultures, which, can be anything from the Ghats of Varanasi to the markets of Calcutta to the festivals of Madhya Pradesh, so it's, and also the, individuals doing portraits of people, and very much so how people live, which normally, as you would know, in the case of India, especially small town India and rural India, the neighborhood is really the fulcrum, in a way, of the community. And that has always been of great interest to me. And which is why I, said, hey, listen, wow, thank you for thinking of me for this particular subject. So here I am. All right, the photographs I'm sharing, I've deliberately not kept them in any kind of chronological or geographical order, because as I go through them and I talk about them, you realize, and at least I feel that way, that how India is so diverse, but actually together as there is so much similarity in the way, we live across, whether we are in India or whether in South India. Yet there's such a distinct stamp of each area, and not just in terms of state, but also in terms of, a particular town, a particular locality, a particular community, or a particular religion. And to my mind, and I must make this point because this is something which is very dear to my heart, we are such a diverse nation. We are actually a continent which pretends to be a country. And we should take pride in that, and we should really thrive in that. And especially as photographers, you can't ask for a better canvas than India. And as far as I'm concerned, I would need 10 lifetimes, and I hope I have those, to come back and shoot more and more and explore the various facets in the various areas, and the various cultures, and the various ways of life. It is very enriching. So here we go. This particular photograph I shot in Bombay a few years ago. And as happens in most big cities, and for that matter, even the small towns of India, early in the morning, there is a wholesale market where, vegetables, etc., arrive in very large numbers and very large weights, where the wholesalers then, in turn sell them in bulk to retailers. The other is that there's always a mid retailer or wholesaler who buys it in semi-bulk, and then these markets are set up on the pavements in certain areas of the city. Like in this case in Bombay, this is, if I remember correctly, somewhere near Mahim and near the railway station. So there's an entire pavement on which, you'll find literally dozens of vendors. And it's from here that either people buy for home use, or they can actually also be buying, vegetables to in turn then sell on their radies, or, they buy in smaller quantities and go and sell into the lanes of various colleges, etc. So I find it a very fascinating thing that there's this, beautiful supply chain, which, we make it sound like some very sophisticated, modern thing which has been invented in recent, times. But this has been in existence for generations, and this works so beautifully. And of course, since I'm absolutely passionate about color, I'm always looking for these kind of splashes of color in the marketplace. And I promise you, Indian women always live up to it, as you can see in this photograph. One of the other things I find very charming, and this is again Bombay, is there are these fishing villages, and this one is the one near Mahi. And they obviously, there's some NGO would have gone and worked with the local residents there and done these beautiful murals on the walls of the buildings. Also very nice is the bunch of kids sitting there at the bottom of the picture if you see carefully, totally engrossed in what they're doing. So this is the kind of thing which you could look for in a neighborhood. It doesn't have to always be teeming with people, but there could be a character of its own, whether it's in terms of color, or whether it's in terms of what kids are doing, or just this general shapes. What I also found very interesting, if you look very carefully, down that very narrow lane, there are these garbage bins, which are the kind which you probably won't even see in the more sophisticated areas of the city. And I was quite, impressed by that. This I moved to another part of the country. This is in a small town called Bundi in Rajasthan. And I always make it a point to go early in the morning because there's a different life and there's a different rhythm to the life of a small town or a village early in the morning. That's the time when kids are going to school, or people are going to buy vegetables, or vendors are setting up the shops. It's very different from what happens later in the day, and I find that very interesting. And this, of course, this photograph really works because if you see, the backdrop is so obviously of an ancient heritage town. But this girl is dressed, to go to school, and obviously in a uniform which is more contemporary. And I love the little detail of the water bottle, and the color of the water bottle, which the mother is holding so nonchalantly as she's walking her child to school. On the other hand, like I was saying, early in the morning is the time when people start setting up their shops or their offices. And that's also a time for people to just sit for a while and gossip or chat, which usually happens in chai ki dukan of small towns and villages, which incidentally are my favorite places anywhere in India. And I make it a point to not just go there and have chai, but to sit there for a while and talk to people and understand what's happening in that particular part of the country. It's just a great way to just understand what is happening in India. I love the political discourse and the discussions and the local happenings, and it's always really great fun. On the other hand, if you step back and you realize the neighborhood doesn't have to be just a lane or a cluster of houses, a large colony is an expanded neighborhood. And especially when you look at older towns, the architecture was binding in its style, in its contiguity, and it's just literally that lanes kind of went from one to the other. It's almost like the blood vessels of a human body, which in a way gets one part to enrich the other part or stay in touch with the other part. And what I also really like, about these old towns is if you see carefully, there's a network of chats or terraces. And as kids, and I've seen it myself, whether it's during kite flying season or whether it's just in the summer where people just, hang around on the terraces because it's too hot inside the house, etc. And then that's an entire ecosystem, or that's an entire social system stage which is available to your photographers to explore. Or if you come down to earth again and you walk through the lanes, and there is so much of life which is lived, on the periphery of a house. Including the fact that the architecture is such that there would be a small porch, or there would be a platform, or there would be a covered area, in which women sit and do household chores together, generally gossip about what's happening, kiski shaadi kisse karani hai, kiski shaadi theek nahi chal rahi hai. All those things happen, and it's I'm a bit careful about photographing women, especially in small towns, because you're not always, as a man, you have to be sensitive to that. But having spent many years, walking around and taking such pictures, you do develop a kind of a sixth sense where you know that a person is, all right if you do take the pictures. And of course, as a matter of rule, in case I find that person is uncomfortable or finds it objectionable, I immediately put my camera down and I walk up to them and I say, "I'm sorry, I hope you didn't mind that." And invariably, I find that if you do that, people say, "नहीं नहीं क्या problem है, photo लिया तो क्या हो गया?" So it is, photography has to also, you have to understand, is about human relations, both in terms of observing human relations and practicing human relations. So that is something which I would like to add in this particular case here. Just another, this is actually another town. The previous one was Jodhpur, and this is, I think, if I remember correctly, Bundi. But there is a distinct, Rajasthan kind of architecture, which you'll find. And of course, the color blue is very Jodhpur color, but it also extends into some other towns too. Of course, as a street photographer, you look for a location, you look for a situation. And in this case, like I said, we're talking about the neighborhood, so lanes and homes and areas within them are the areas which we are operating in. But there are times when you look at just the play of color or the play of form. And I saw this blue wall and this red, chadar, which you can use as a curtain. And through the corner of my eye, I saw this lady who was walking down the lane. I could see that she's going to go to this house. And I timed it in a way that I photographed her just as she entered the doorway. So this is very much a part of a neighborhood, though in this case, it's not strictly showing a larger expanse of the neighborhood. As opposed to this one, which is of course very much a neighborhood, and what I was talking about in the previous two pictures away where the two ladies were sitting and chopping vegetables. You'll find families, especially in the evenings, sitting outside when the weather is a bit cooler, when there's a bit of a breeze blowing through the lanes, generally just chatting, gossiping, people come to each other's homes, just sit there, which in this case is what is happening there. The people, I realized when I spoke to them later, are from 3 different households actually. It's just not just one family. And this, of course, is a typical kind of a pastime for people of my age in smaller towns, where they can actually spend hours playing this wonderful game called Sweep, or any other card game, depending on the part of the country which you're in. And it's just, at times it can be really hilarious for the way they pull each other's legs, and they can get into these very friendly fights about one particular card, or who played it wrong. And, there's so many times that I just end up just hanging around there watching the drama, rather than worrying about, okay, should I take a picture or not? Photography then becomes actually just an incidental part of the experience about being in a neighborhood, if you open your heart to what's going on. Look at details, look for details, whether it's in the colors, whether it's in the form. There was a time, since, as you can see, I'm old enough to see the transition of India from a time it was all organic materials to the introduction of plastics. And there were a few years when I stopped taking too many pictures because I didn't like plastic in my photographs. Then I realized, and I told myself, who are you to? You can't stop. What is the change? The change is happening now. Either as a photographer, you engage with it and record it, or you say you're going to stop taking pictures. But I can't impose the fact that it should only be organic and there should be no plastic, etc., etc. So, which is why then I started looking at plastic too as just another form, just another crucible, just another set of colors, and how that then interacts with everything else in the picture. The very first photograph, which is in Bombay and which is the wholesale vegetable market. This is Calcutta, in an area called Bada Bazaar, where the fish catch is brought in by the wholesalers, and in the morning you'll find people who bought smaller quantities, and then they line up on the pavement, and they in turn then sell to the people who want to buy it from that neighborhood. And again, there's this entire drama of negotiation, of haggling, and interestingly, normally because this is in the same neighborhood, so it's they obviously interact with each other every day or at least every few times a week. So they really know each other. There's a nice play of haggling and nay, what you gave me yesterday was awful, so therefore give me a discount, etc. So keep a look out for that. It just makes your picture more interesting in terms of body language and things like that. Just another view of the same. And then there are kids, and who for me are my favorite subject in a way, because they are so joyful, they are so full of pep and energy and life, and really as a photographer, you'll find that they are the ones who are most keen on joining in with whatever you're doing. So in this case, this is again in Calcutta, and I was just hanging around with the rivers on the left, was photographing what's happening on the river there. And these kids jumped onto this platform and called out to me and said, take a picture. It was like, that we are posing for you now, you take, and I never say no to anyone who says, take my picture. I know a lot of photographers, especially ones who are starting out, say, oh, it's so irritating when people, say, take my picture and all. You should take it as a blessing when people say, take my picture. I mean, are you there as a thief that you want to just steal pictures and go away? Or do you want to be part of, whatever it is that is giving you so much in terms of photographic material? Get involved, be part of it, be thankful for the fact that people want and recognize you and validate the fact that you're there. And then no one better than children to validate you as far as that is concerned. There again, it's depending on your body language, depending on how pleasant you look, you walk through neighborhoods and, if you look like the kind of person who's shifty and who's slinking around trying to find that one candid moment which no one will see me, etc., then people also feel, a sense of distrust towards you. But if you're open, if you're, not the kind of person who seems like, I'm here just because it's my right, or it's, I'm here to take a picture and go away and make thousands of rupees with your picture, whatever. You smile at people. In this case, for instance, this is in Tamil Nadu. I definitely don't know their language. Right? We did get into a bit of a verbal communication, but more of a hello, where are you from, etc. But just if you smile, and you find that that is probably one of the most communicating things between two human beings, Just be nice, be comfortable, don't slink around. I'm a street photographer and I'm here to steal candid moments. And I think that is such a horrible way to approach street photography. And there's always so much activity, especially in the mornings, and go to any part of South India, especially Kerala and Tamil Nadu, where women make the rangoli. I'm sorry, I don't quite remember the actual name which they use for rangoli in the South. But I also love doodling, etc. And I'm just absolutely, so impressed with the ease and precision which these women make their patterns. And they're so beautiful. Also, if you look at the body languages, she's going to spend the next half an hour bent over like this, making this pattern. And you try and stay in that position for 1 minute, I promise you, and you'll understand what it means to do this now. Then there's always the local kirana shop in a neighborhood, which caters to the households right around their area. And they obviously, keep in stock things in smaller quantities. But this kind of, just look at it. It's just if I had to go and set this up in terms of colors and form, I wouldn't be able to do a better job. If someone told me, go and take a lovely photograph of a colorful kirana shop, I can't improve on what this lady's done. You know, hats off to her. That's another photograph of a much more, and this is, I mean, depending on if it's a regular day or if this was in a particular festival. I'm sorry, I don't remember which festival that was. Where the sheer scale and dexterity for the column is what is the name, right? Is so much more exotic and so much more larger than life. It's just fabulous. So look for such opportunities in neighborhoods. At different times of the year, different things happen. So all of them can give you different kinds of material to photograph. And invariably, whether it's outside schools or in markets, you'll find people forming clusters where there could be anything from waiting for the school bus, or in this case, there's a procession which is going past, and people are waiting for that procession to come to this particular lane. And if you can see the way they're dressed, it's obviously festival time. So it's more colorful. There's a lot more, with of course the addition of balloons on the right hand side. It just adds to the charm of the moment. Another one of my favorite subjects: good old men who sit around, gossiping, cribbing, bitching, and each of them know a better way of running the country than the Prime Minister does, and they are always putting forth their point of view. I find that really wonderful. So that's, there's so many things which happen. There's simple ways of life, whether it's from the old people to the children, to these really, lovely looking police women. They were also waiting for the procession to come by. And I think this is the last photograph. And this is what I mean by, if you let yourself be drawn into this situation, let yourself be part of the life of people who you're photographing. I mean, look at the joy, look at the energy of this. These kids are playing, cricket in the field there. And I'd stopped my car to take a photograph of a house on the right-hand side, which had some 25 colors, which is just fabulous. And they saw me and they just ran and, just made this cluster. And I told them, that I'll take a photograph, and I took quite a few of them, but only if you will, and I don't remember which cricketer we were, I think probably Virat Kohli was the best. And they were thrilled with the fact that, they could do that. So they were going Jai Ho Virat Kohli type of thing. So look at the energy, look at the fun, and don't miss out on this, just because you want to be a street photographer and you think that the rule is to be candid and therefore be invisible only, and no, do that too. I mean, let that be just one part of your experience of being a street photographer. But remember that a neighborhood is a physical space. A neighborhood is made up of people, and people are made up of human reactions and human relations. Let that be your guiding principle as far as photography neighborhoods are concerned.
So I was asking, do you have any tip for people who are going to shoot from the cell phones?
See, I am of a very firm opinion that a camera is a camera. It could be housed in a mobile, or it could be housed in a DSLR body, or it could be housed in a mirrorless. All right. Yes, what does change from one to the other is how much you can control the way the camera operates. All right. And therefore, to that extent, it changes how you engage with what you photograph. To make it simpler, what I mean is that in the case of a phone, normally it is fully automatic. You don't have to worry about what the exposures are and what the aperture is and all that stuff. Whereas in the case of a DSLR, you're able to control each and every aspect of it. Right? But the most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, regarding photography, is that you need to control your photograph and the content and the composition. Right? So as long as you have a good idea of what is it that you're engaging with and what you want to say about it, whether you're shooting with the mobile phone or whether you're shooting with the DSLR or whether you're shooting with the mirrorless, or you are the kind who wants to take a 4x5 camera and shoot on sheet film, that's up to you. Yes, your engagement will vary depending on the kind of ease of the use of a camera. But just keep in mind that it's a photograph, that is what you're there for. And if you understand and can engage with the content and how you compose that photograph, that to my mind is really the most important.